Exploration 3 ends up lasting almost 20 hours, relying primarily on the team's radio transmissions interspersed with a few clips from the high eights. Davidson relates how Holloway, Jed, and Wax take 45 minutes to reach the spiral staircase, only to spend the next 7 hours walking down it. When they at last stop, a dropped flare still does not illuminate or sound a bottom. Jed notes that the diameter has also increased from 200 feet to well over 500 feet. It takes them over 11 hours to return. Unlike the two previous explorations, this intrusion brings them face to face with the consequences of the immensity of that place. All three men come back cold, depleted, their muscles aching, their enthusiasm gone. "I got some vertigo," Jed confesses. "I had to step way back from the edge and sit down. That was a first for me." Wax is more cavalier, claiming to have felt no fear, though for some reason he is more exhausted than the rest. Holloway remains the most stoic, keeping any doubts to himself, adding only that the experience is beyond the power of any high 8 or 35mm camera. "It's impossible to photograph what we saw." Even after seeing Davidson's accomplished shots, it is hard to disagree with Holloway. The darkness recreated in a lab or television set does not begin to tell the true story. Whether chemical clots determining black, or video gray approximating absence, the images still remain two-dimensional. In order to have a third dimension, depth cues are required, which in the case of the stairway means more light. The flares, however, barely illuminate the size of that bore. In fact, they are easily extinguished by the very thing they were supposed to expose. Only knowledge illuminates that bottomless place, disclosing the deep, ultimately absent in all the tapes and stills, those strange cartes d'évites. Excerpt from House of Leaves by Mark Z. Bluesky. "A ghost, though invisible, still is like a place your sight can knock on, echoing, but here within the thick black pelt your strongest gaze will be absorbed and utterly disappear. Just as a raving madman, when nothing else can ease him, charges into his dark night howling, pounds on the padded wall, and feels the rage being taken in and pacified. She seems to hide all looks that have ever fallen into her, so that, like an audience, she can look them over, menacing and sullen, and curl asleep with them. But all at once, as if awakened, she turns her face to yours, and with a shock you see yourself, tiny, inside the golden amber of her eyeballs, suspended, like a prehistoric fly." Black Cat by Rainier Maria Rilke. Hello, and welcome to this episode of I Am the Party. I am Paul. It's nice to be recording and speaking again. I've been doing a lot of outside of session play, again, using the everything is play principle. I've been thinking a lot about what's going to happen next. We left out a bit of a cliffhanger in the last session, and I was very excited to think of what that could mean. Before I get too far into thinking about, why did I choose those readings to begin this episode, I do want to make a quick correction for my last episode. So I mentioned the book Monstrous, which I am continuing to use. I mentioned the book Monstrous in the context of the creators, and I misread one of the credits. And I just wanted to make sure I credited Kenny Webb, who was another main contributor to the project, and want to correct that from last time. Mentioning that, and then also wanted to just share or highlight how you can get a hold of me, or where you can kind of follow the development of my podcast and my episodes. I'm available via email by iamthepartypodcast@gmail.com. Also under the same name, I Am the Party, available on Bluesky, and I am available on most all major podcast platforms where you can subscribe so you can catch the new episodes, if at all possible. And if you're so inclined to give a rating, that would be wonderful, I guess. I've heard those things help. I don't know. So that's how you can get a hold of me. Back to Monstrous, and back to what I just read from House of Leaves and that poem Black Cat. We left off last episode exploring inky black space, and I wanted to really explore the depth of the darkness of the space. It's hard to do in audio, of course, because I'm just describing a space, but I wanted to find a passage, and I ended up finding the passage I read from House of Leaves, which is my favorite novel of all time. I'm one of those people who's a fan of House of Leaves. It occurred to me that book really does a great job of describing big empty spaces, but with also like a menace, some darkness that is hard to otherwise envision because it's not a real space. So I found that exploration number 3 passage and have that in mind as I'm thinking about the environment that the stewards are in, all of that the idea of the very thing that you need to illuminate a space or to give context is light to a darkness, and the darkness is the thing that swallows the light up. That may be a bit of a theme. As I've been playing through the Rift of Seeping Night, it has been definitely a major thing to explore of how this small mountain village of Spire has been traditionally a light worshipping place. But their immortal wizard, Baltothum, who's supposedly been studying the light, seems to be lost in his own home. And so that's what brought the stewards to come help and try to reestablish the connection of their organization with Baltothum on this side of the mountains. And that's where they got lost at the end of the last session. The poem that I chose, Black Cat, actually is quoted in German at the end of the passage from House of Leaves. Part of it is, and I wasn't even going to attempt to recite the German, and it wouldn't really make sense unless you speak German and could understand my terrible pronunciation of it. What I did instead was I just found the poem and read that part. I liked the idea. I had a similar idea, actually, of the blackness of the fur of the cat, and something that you'll see here in a minute from within this black, inky morass of darkness that the stewards find themselves in. And then going back to Monstrous, I had an opportunity. I took a picture of the 2-page spread for rolling up like lich details. Wanted to, just behind the scenes, like as a solo role player, have some randomness and something that was outside of my control as far as what this character is. And I wouldn't exactly just refer to him as a lich. He's not exactly a lich, but approximately he's lichy. And so I used Monstrous, hashtag Lichspiration, and use that to give my character here some more interesting details, and then combining that with the specifics from Karn. I don't know how to pronounce it actually, but the rule system I'm using. I have the bestiary now, which I picked up off Amazon for like $3. It's a great deal, and I pulled the lich stats out of there to help me also get an idea of what this character that we're encountering, what they might be capable of. So it helped me really come up with some cool ideas, and this is not a guy you want to mess with. I shared a picture of what the stats were, and I love Karen because I'll read the stats, all of the stats of this character. 18 hit points, or hit protection as it's called in this game. 1 armor, an 18 will save, an attack of a soul dagger that does d8 damage, an ability to cast spells without consequence, so without gaining any fatigue. So that alone, this character will be constantly casting spells if ever finding themselves in a combat, messing things up for whoever its enemies are. And then a critical, so if an attack from this character reduces the hit protection of another character below 0, I believe, is when a critical happens, and that will, for this character, paralyze its target. That's with the Soul Dagger. And then the other big ability is that it has 2d6 random spell books or spells that it can cast, again, without consequence. So I rolled 2d6. I got 9 rolled up in the Cairn, the first edition rulebook, just 9 random spells. So I've got some real clear abilities that it's capable of doing. Of course, my stewards don't know any of this, so being able to differentiate player knowledge versus character knowledge is like fundamental to the experience here. But that's the character as solo RPG GM I was able to roll up, and he has a couple other cool abilities, I think, as a result of Monstrous, the random attributes of a lich that you can roll up. This is a really cool character, and I wouldn't necessarily even call him like a big bad by any means. He might actually be an ally, but definitely a big character, a big NPC is able to quite hold its own if worse were to come to worse. Previously on I Am the Party, the group of 4 stewards found themselves over a large black morass, open cavernous space where they could hear some faint mourning noises, crying, tears falling, a very distant dripping noise. They found themselves completely enveloped by this darkness. As a result, they didn't really have many options in front of them or behind them. They found themselves pretty much in a black void. They made the decision together to try to follow this sound that they were hearing of what they believed sounded similar to their the chaplain Bellerophon that they lost from their squad, and they started to just move forward into the darkness, or whatever direction it was relative to that noise. They never discovered the character. They never found necessarily Bellerophon, but they have come across a robed figure. Seems to be almost robed within darkness itself. Did turn to greet them when they got close, and this whole time they're walking through about 6 inches or so of black inky water, but no other features. There seems to be no end or restrictions or parameters or limits upon the darkness in which they find themselves. Coming across this figure of robed darkness, it greeted them and beckoned them and mentioned that it's been so long since it had been waiting for someone to come and greet it. That's where we begin. So Deadlock is roughly the ranger of the group. He's holding this off-white pale orb, and it's the only thing that's casting light in this whole space. None of their torches seem to light. No fire seems to light. Talls has a light charm, and it won't seem to go either. So literally it's just this one orb that Deadlock is carrying. Come and approach my playing field. The board is waiting. The other 3 stewards all look at Sarge, and they're not quite sure what to do either. Within the light of the orb, Sarge is able to make out that there actually are a few features, or one main feature, I should say, upon this creature's face underneath its hood. And Sarge is able to see glimmering in the light, reflecting from the orb that Deadlock is carrying, that the creature does have a mouth. The mouth is moving. Its lips are black. Its teeth are also black and reflecting a wetness about them, which is really the only way that Sarge is able to make out that the creature is moving at all, almost. And Sarge decides to come closer, and the creature, with just one robed hand or arm appendage, whatever it might be, because it's just completely covered in dark. The cloak itself that it's wearing has a slight shimmer to it, as if it's almost darker than the darkness around it. Again, this is all because of the orb, that they're able to see any of it. And it makes a sweeping motion, and right behind it, Sarge now can see that there's a small table in the middle of this dark space, and there are 2 stools. All of this is, again, darkness, black. Everything is carved in like an onyx and ebony. The table itself seems to be a board of some kind, and it's covered in these little intricate, almost like chess pieces, but there's such a large variety that Sarge is looking at it, trying to come up with some semblance of what is this. It's clearly there for a purpose, but what is its purpose? And they aren't able to draw any kind of conclusion about what the pieces. There's no rhyme or reason. What could the pieces be doing? The entity continues to point towards one of the stools, and Sarge sits down. The other 3 all stand around behind Sarge, and the entity sits down across from them. Please, make a move. The entity points towards the board. Sarge thinks, and there's no distinction between any of the pieces. Looking at the board, it's clear that there's something here to be done. There's some strategy, some greater tactical decision that could be made, but there's just no rhyme or reason. There's not even a distinction between what might be Sarge's pieces and what might be this creature's. And Sarge is at a complete loss, is just sitting there in thought. And suddenly Sax speaks up, and she says, we're looking for someone, and we've heard, all of this seems crazy, but it feels like we've heard him in the distance crying. The creature looks at Sax, essentially no eyes, but the face turns to face Sax and says, you hear crying here. That's very interesting. Do the rest of you, what do all of you hear here? Talls and Deadlock look at each other, and shrug. Sarge finally is able to snap out of the confusion and says, "We've all heard it. Who are you? What is this place?" The creature looks up and says, "Well, I used to be known by one name, and now I have another. More of a title, you see. I have no idea how much time has passed for you. I've been here, but it seems like lifetimes." The four stewards kind of just exchange glances. Sarge speaks up. "Well, what used to be your name?" I forget. It's been so long. It was something. I served as an expert. I studied. I was credited with great knowledge." Talls speaks up. "Was it Baltothum, maybe?" And the creature nods slowly and says, That could be. But now, that is no longer my name. Now I am known as Midnight." Talls seems really interested in this. Midnight, that's a weird name. How did you find yourself here, and where exactly is here? And the creature makes a move on the table and moves a piece, and Sarge is bewildered. Still thinking, still observing, trying to get a sense of what's going on in this massive strategic playing field. "We are in the Bridge of Darkness." And that catches all of their attention. Bridges are what, in this world, are kind of the transition from death and this current life. You walk your bridge, and you move through your bridge to find what comes next. And so it's kind of a purgatory land. To be in a bridge is very unusual. It's not a good thing to find yourself kind of walking the lands of the dead. But even more so, Talls is alarmed by this and speaks up. "What do you mean the Bridge of Darkness?" Sarge looks over at her. "What's wrong?" Talls, "Spit it out." "There is no Bridge of Darkness," Talls says. It's not a real place. I've never heard of it." And the squad is looking to Talls because bridges are also the source of magical power. It's where they being mages, wizards, siphon energy off of and pull power from, and they all have some kind of alignment. Talls happens to be aligned with the Bridge of Fire, and that tends to flavor what kind of magic you're casting. But Talls just looks at the other three and says, "This isn't a real place. I don't know who that is, but are you part of the court? Can this be real?" And she's starting to panic. I'm going to have her make a will check, and her will is 12. Let's do a d20 roll here. Ooh, 13. She's starting to lose it. She is not having it. As she starts to panic, actually, the other three of them are all going to notice that there's something real wrong. If their squad mage is having such a not good situation that they're approaching, they're all freaking out too. So we're going to start with Sarge to make a will check, a will save. 11, and I needed a 13. So Sarge is keeping it under control as best as they can. Oh, I rolled a 20 for Sax. She's lost it. She only has an 8 will to begin with, but that 20, that's a critical failure. Sax falls to her knees. Sarge immediately goes down to her and to kind of hold her in place, try to keep her from falling into this water. Shallow as it is, it's still possible to drown in it. She starts just kind of murmuring to herself that if Bellerophon were here. She seems to be lost in her grief. Deadlock will also roll, 13 out of 14. Deadlock's able to keep himself situated. He tries to start to comfort Talls, and Talls just isn't having it. Laughing more to itself. Midnight, he's bemused even, by the reaction to this news. He looks over to Deadlock. Deadlock's still holding that light orb and says, "Please, may I see that trinket?" Deadlock does not look excited about that, and Sax groans in mourning for Bellerophon. "Would you stop that already?" And with a snap, Sax disappears. In her place, a goat, which Sarge is now holding a goat. It's the strangest thing. They fall back away from this goat. The three of them are looking on in terror as Sax has been replaced by this goat, and Midnight pulls a small obsidian dagger from somewhere within the robe sleeve of his left hand, and with his right hand quickly moves to slit the throat of this goat. Blood sprays from its throat as if it's a sacrifice, and the three of them look on in terror and shock. I just needed silence. I lose myself sometimes. You, and he looks back at Deadlock, who now is barely holding on to himself. You have the will to resist me? And he's going to make another check to see, does he have the will to resist? And he does. What are you talking about? Yes, bring our friend back. No. This is the Bridge of Darkness. We are all on our own. And he continues to keep his gaze on Deadlock while Sarge is stunned, unable to move, and Talls is trying to regain her composure. Deadlock is the only one who's kind of standing there unstunned comparatively to the other two, and he's holding this orb, and it starts to glow hot, and it's their only source of light. And he's starting to get a little unnerved by the fact that it's glowing warm, and he's not sure what to do. Midnight is extremely intent on keeping Deadlock locked in to his line of sight. You impressed me. I have gifts to give. You seem to be worthy. More than anyone here. And more than anyone I've seen since coming to this place. And he looks up. Midnight looks up. Deadlock, looking just over and beyond, swears that he sees movement. Vast shape covered possibly in fur or feathers or something, dwarfing what Deadlock thought could be existing in this space. It really gives him a different perception beyond what he was thinking this dark cavernous space could hold, and realizing that there may truly be no limits. Midnight shudders and says, yes, there are many gifts to be had here. Would you care to join me and receive my gifts? Deadlock looks down at Sarge. Sarge is just shaking, shuddering now with what they've seen happen, and Talls as well. Talls is now on her knees, and she's just holding herself, and Deadlock looks to Midnight and slowly nods and says, I will accept your gift. Midnight holds out his hand, and Deadlock knows that the creature in front of him wants the orb. He takes a step forward and puts the orb into Midnight's hand, and immediately the orb goes out. Darkness surrounds them. It engulfs them. It swallows them whole. Sarge and Talls are shivering, an icy grip upon every aspect of them, physically, their soul, their emotions, and a great rumbling and a sound of rushing water like nothing they've ever heard. Off in the distance, it seems to be echoing all around them, and they get washed away. They wake up. Their whole body feels bruised, battered, but they're in a bed. They seem to have bandages covering several parts of their body, but there's sunlight. Sarge just feels pure relief, cannot believe that there's light again in the world. Looks around and realizes that they're actually in a room with walls and a ceiling and a floor and a window where the sun shines through. Oh, I didn't think you'd wake up. It's the old druid, the one who welcomed them into Spire in the first place. He sits at a chair by Sarge's bed, offers them a glass of water, which Sarge drinks gratefully. Sarge looks over and sees Talls is in the next bed, not stirring, but not in any clear distress, just as battered and bruised as they are, looking for any kind of answer. They look back to the druid. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. I don't know what happened in the apartments of Baltothum, but there's much to be done. Much has happened in the weeks that you've been missing. I have many questions for you. And that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk again soon.